when we hear in a group like this, when we hear the phrase a divine plan, I think we automatically think of the title of Brother Russell's first Perusia volume, Divine Plan of the Ages. And God does have a plan, I mean, but it actually extends, if you recall, the book, The Divine Plan of the Ages, concerns itself with the 7,000-year period of the last creative day. And the ages are the parts of that day. But God's plan extends on either side of that. Concerning plan, everybody in this room learned something, a few months ago, okay? You learned that there's going to be a meeting in Ontario, California. And what did you do? You said, I'm going to go to that meeting. Then what did you do? You looked at the calendar. You looked at your obligations. You look at your checkbook. You look at the planes, right? And you think that whole thing through. Then you take action and boom, here you are. And we do that. You also have to think of, what are you going to do with the dog? Right? I mean, we don't have a dog anymore, but we would always, we would put our dog in the kennel because he loved that kennel and they loved him. So we didn't feel at all bad about having to go away. So the reason I mention that is because this is one of the things that we do because it's a thing that our Creator does. And that's why we do that. We reason our way through something that doesn't even exist yet. And we think, I want that to happen. What's going to take to make that happen, right? And here you are. And your dog is not going to plan a trip, right? He can't do that. And I want to quickly read a paragraph from the 12th Epiphany volume, Brother Johnson, page 152, if you're making notes, and concerning planning. And he asks, is it part of wisdom to have a plan? All reasonable people will agree that it is. Any reasonable person who has a work of any detail at all to do will make a plan according to which he hopes to accomplish it. The more intricate a work is, the more careful planning does it require to ensure success in its accomplishment. In every calling of life, this is true. In the domains of, and here's this, Brother Johnson, here we go. In the domains of family, municipality, state, country, politics, war, education, art, science, literature, manufacture, philosophy, industry, labor, finance, acting, oratory, that's 17. More or less detailed matters are planned. He who practices the policy of hit or miss in any matter of detail almost invariably makes a failure there, and hence all wise men plan their work if it contains anything of detail. God is certainly not less able, not less wise than man, hence in the very intricate details connected with his affairs, he plans matters carefully. So, some of the things that I want to talk about involve time before the divine plan of the ages and after the end of the millennium, when we have some information. It's not that much, it's not that definite, but we do have information. And I just wanted to, before we talk about these issues involving time, I brought with me a copy of the photodrama. There's a few copies back here on the table. Because one time, now somebody who was a Sister Kathy Larkin just mentioned Brother Ed Tomkevich, or was it? So a lot of us knew Brother Ed, I think. Wonderful guy. I used to call, I don't know if he liked it or not, but I used to refer to him as the tenor. He had a nice voice, he had a good tenor, he could sing, that guy could sing. And one time when this was mentioned about the length of time of processes of creation of, the universe and the earth and so forth, he objected to someone suggesting that ordering of the earth took longer than 49,000 years. And I just wanted everybody to know where that idea comes from. Okay, it comes from page 8 of the Photodrama of Creation, where I'm going to read this, Brother Russell. We follow the theory that each of the 7 days of the creative week was a period of 7,000 years. This 7 times 7,000 equals 49,000 years, ushering in a grand Jubilee epoch. Now, that makes sense if you're, if you're familiar with the Jubilee cycles, and every 7th year was a Sabbath year, and then after 7 periods of 7 years, was a Jubilee year. So that's where that idea comes from. Well, I want to read Brother Russell's comments. Also, 2 other additional comments from these same pages. And one of them is that concerning God's work, he says, he prefers to work out his glorious designs along natural lines. That's on page 8. And on page 9, he says, while divine operations are all great and wonderful, they are usually accomplished by reasonable methods called the course of nature, and nature's course must be marked out by nature's God. In other words, we should assess how long things take by watching how they operate in nature. I'm going to put this down. Oh. I'm going to read Psalms 19 before I move any further. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night declares knowledge. There is no speech, there are no words, their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. And if you're going to paraphrase that, you would think of what happens to you when you go out and look at the night sky. And you stare up there, and after a couple of minutes, you hit that thing where the circuit breaker goes, and you realize you'll never understand what you're looking at. It's too big. So 46 miles from here in that direction is the Mount Wilson Observatory. Everybody's heard of the Hubble telescope. I think everybody in this room has heard of the Hubble telescope. Okay? And Edwin Hubble, an astronomer, famous American astronomer, worked at the Mount Wilson Observatory. It's only 46 miles from here. And his work, beginning there in 1912, they have 2 of what are still some of the most advanced telescopes in the world, even though technology has advanced beyond ground mirror telescopes. They still have a 60-inch telescope and a 100-inch telescope. Just put 100 inches here. From side to side, that's the size of a mirror that's ground to be used in one of the telescopes at Mount Wilson. Edwin Hubble's job there, among others, very prominent. You have to be at the top of your professional game in astronomy to be able to work at a place like that. It costs millions upon millions of dollars to build an observatory like that. And what he was doing was cataloging the stars in the sky to see how far away they were. And this began in about 1912. He was born in 1889 and died in 1953. So he was a young man, late 20s, early 30s, very talented guy. And he was looking at the stars night after night. You're going to be in that profession, it's not a day job. You have to work at night, and you take photos, and you're trying. In his case, he was trying to decide how far away the stars are, and I presume that takes years because it's a very, very careful study. The stuff in the night sky barely moves at all, and one of the ways that you need to measure something like that is called parallax. It's when you can see how far away something is by moving your head back and forth. In the case of looking at the night sky, you take some pictures when you're on this side of the sun, and when you move when you move all the way around to the other side of the sun, you take pictures there and you compare. Right, so that's one of the things you have to do. Very laborious, but Edwin Hubble discovered something that no one had ever noticed before, or no one had ever recognized, which is that some of the stars, or some of the bright spots in the sky, which were referred to as nebula, because they were nebulous, were actually galaxies outside of our own. No one had ever thought of that before. It was a new idea. At the same time, there's another man whom you have never heard of. His name is Vesto Slipher. And he was working at the Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona, which is this way. I don't know how far it is. 46 miles. Mount Wilson. I don't know how far Flagstaff, Arizona is. But Mr. Vesto Slipher, another important astronomer, because you can't have access to that observatory unless you're one of the top astronomers in the country. And what he was doing there was he was doing the same thing that Edwin Hubble was doing. He was examining the night sky, but he was doing spectrographic analysis. He was looking at the colors of light. If you took a prism and you break the light up into its colors, you can learn different things about the qualities of the light that's coming through the prism. And that's what he was doing. He was doing a spectrographic analysis of the night sky. And each of these processes take years. And one of the things that he noticed was that the nebula, or as they were just becoming known, the galaxies outside of our own, were presenting light in the red end of the spectrum. Light is, did you ever remember this when you were taught as a child, Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet? Okay, so the red end of light is like this. And if you move through to the violet, it's like that, okay? So it's the Doppler effect with light. If it's moving away from you, it gets red. If it's coming toward you, it gets violet. So at the same time, there was a third man. His name was Georges Lemaitre. And he was Belgian. That's why I say Georges Lemaitre. And he was a physicist. He was a priest. He was a priest and a physicist. And he was doing his own research based on Einstein's general relativity, which it made him believe, Mr. Lemaitre, that the universe was doing this, right? He was convinced just because Einstein's equations showed it. Incidentally, Mr. Einstein knew that, but he did not like the idea that the universe was expanding because everybody wanted a fixed universe at that time. So Mr. Einstein did something that he later confessed was the biggest mistake of his career. He made up a number. He called it the cosmological constant, so that his equations would stop showing the universe expanding. So he was confronted with that later by Hubble and Vesto Slipher. And he had to admit that he did that. but he admitted it. He said, I made it up. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. So good for him. Okay. So the point, by the way, Vesto Slifer led a team that discovered Pluto. I don't know if that's worth anything anymore, but it was that important a guy discovered a planet, helped discover a planet. All right, so the first mention of this expanding universe was in a paper published by Mr. Georges Lemaitre in 1931. And of course, this idea that the universe was getting bigger was completely outside of astronomical orthodoxy. So even people inside the trades, as it were, mocked it. They came up with a phrase, the Big Bang, because they thought it was a crazy idea. But as time passed, you know, these ideas take a long time to crystallize in the minds of people. And it took decades for other people in cosmology and astrophysics and astronomy to recognize that, hey, this is just, it's a mathematical fact. There's just no point in denying it anymore. There are still people today who are in astronomy and astrophysics who are looking for some other answer because and this is just my opinion, which I formed over years of reading about this, but in the realms of endeavor where you're looking for origins, like if you're a cosmologist or an astrophysicist, or if you're an evolutionary biologist, that's in air quotes, by the way, because I use that term as an oxymoron, then you're very likely to be atheistic or deeply agnostic, even though only 2% of human race is atheists. And I think it's because those are places where you would go to look for answers as to where did we come from? What's our fate? Where are we going to go? Because you can't get rid of those questions just because you're an atheist. You still would like to know what, you know, where did we begin? What's our destiny, right? So those fields are very dense, especially evolutionary biology, dense with atheistic thinkers. And that means, you know, they're people that got jobs and they get driver's licenses and they raise kids and whatever. But that explains why there's so many of that type of thinker in those fields. So next thing I want to ask you to think about. So we have established that the universe is getting bigger. And after enough time passes, people in these fields start thinking about, well, what if we stop the tape and run it backwards? You know, what's going to happen? And that's where we're at today. The expanding universe, especially since the Hubble and the James Webb Telescope, is deeply established. And only in the last few decades has it just become a crystallized fact. Some people still resist it. So I want us to think about now the first verse of the first book of the Bible, which anybody in this room can repeat right now. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Most unremarkable thing, right? Until you put it into context. Moses wrote that. And Moses was an Egyptian prince, and he got the best education that an Egyptian prince could get, probably in the courts of, you know, one of the, maybe the most powerful king on earth, or one of. And in Egypt of Moses' time, first of all, they didn't believe, as no one believed, even up until 50 years ago, that the universe had a beginning. Secondly, cosmologies of Egypt there were several versions of the cosmology. Cosmology is a word that means the theory of everything, right? And the cosmologies of Egypt, and I say cosmologies because there were several different ones, pretty similar. They were all based on the Ennead, which is a word that means 9, and it was the Egyptian gods, and they were arranged. It was 4 couples, and then one main god above them, and the couples were in charge of the forces of nature. I've forgotten the details. It's been a long time since I even looked that up. And in Egyptian cosmologies, everything, first there was water, then everything began from water. And all of the cosmologies of the ancient world were all over the place. The Indus Valley, some of the civilizations contemporary with Moses, Egypt, were Sumer and China, Mesopotamia, and in the Indus Valley, the beginnings of what we refer to today as India. And their cosmologies were really all over the map. Some of the Hindu cosmologies involved a multiplicity of gods, all infighting and just crazy stories. But in the beginning, right, Moses was raised like the rest of us. You know, the clothes that we wear, the language you speak, the laws you live by, the food you eat, the social mores that we observe, all of that stuff is, taught. And so different people in different parts of the world eat differently, dress differently, speak differently, have different religious beliefs. And Moses was no different. He was an Egyptian prince. He didn't have any scriptures to look at. He wrote them. He was taught what people were taught in Egypt if they were highly educated. And nobody in any of these cultures, these other cultures these were civilizations, mighty civilizations that came and went, like most of them do, except for Israel. And they had armies and financial systems and, a hierarchy of rulership, beginning with a king on down. And they didn't, any of them, think that there was a beginning to the universe. Crazy idea. You look out there, everything's perfectly affixed. Nothing's moving. And you're at the center of the universe because the universe is revolving around you. You can see it, right? Every day shows you how important you are. You're at the middle of everything. But Moses wrote something that he certainly was not taught, and he may not even have believed it. But he wrote it in the beginning, and somebody's going to say, "Oh, no definite article in the Hebrew." Yeah, right. Yeah, we know that. But subsequent teachings of the Bible instruct us that we'll say, "In the beginning, God." Here's another stumble. See, people, if he could have gathered Moses' contemporaries and getting into a huddle with him, they would say, "Moses, that's stupid. What do why are you writing that? What are you losing your mind? Where were you educated? Come on." In the beginning, God, this is the word Elohim. First of all, beginning means beginning. Okay, we don't have to look it up. God, in the Old Testament, there are 9,000 mentions of God. 6,000 of them are the word capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, which is a transliteration of the Lord's Tetragrammaton, YHWH, Yahweh. The other 3,000 are capital G, small o, small d, which is Elohim. So just in the Old Testament, the God or Lord, we have 9,000 times. But Moses writes that this Elohim creates everything, which again, those guys that were meeting with Moses would have said, what are you talking about? All of the cosmologies of the ancient world had multiplicity of gods, no people that believed that they could have arrived at their situation without multiplicity of gods working it together. And then Moses continues and writes that God created the heavens and the earth, which would be backwards from anything that people believed at the time, because everyone, right up until just a few centuries ago, beginning with Copernicus' famous book in, I don't know, like 1580 or 1620, everybody believed that the earth was the center of the universe and everything revolved around us. So Moses writes this thing that says that there was a beginning to the universe, was the result of an actions by a God, and he created the heavens first and then the earth, because it works in Hebrew the way it works in English. You name the important thing first, the heavens, and the following thing next, the earth. So 3,500 years ago, Moses wrote something that nobody believed, but we find it's true today. So this is, we can learn a lot about our Creator, not from just the words that he provides us in the Bible, but from his works. And I'll quote the apostle here. Romans 1:19, since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. So we can justify the claim that we are able to learn about our Creator by the things he has done, because we read that in the Bible. All right, so here's another allegory I want you to consider with me. And it's an allegory of baker. Worked in a kind of a fancy restaurant one time when I was a little younger. One of my friends was the executive chef at this place in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, the Red Lion Inn, kind of a semi-famous New England stuffy, white clapboard, huge building. And when in that kitchen they had a baker. It was amazing. Hard to find a good baker, I guess. A guy that can make popovers and pie and bread and everything else. So if it was going to be cake time, they were going to serve cake. You have to get the batter, you have to get everything ready ahead of time, because your object is you're going to present freshly baked cake. It's cooled off, but it hasn't had any time for the icing or the decorations to get stale at all. So you have to time everything so that you can go right through the process of getting the batter together, getting a thing in the oven, getting it out, letting it cool off, having the icing ready, ice the cake, decorate the cake, and get it ready just in time. And that's an allegory. Now we've moved on to now God's plan of creating the earth. That's why I wanted to mention the 49,000 years, because when Brother Russell wrote that, let's think now, that was the photodrama of creation, was an 8-hour, 4-part film presentation that cost $1 million in 1914. And this photodrama book that I dropped on the floor there is a collection of photos and text from that presentation. And I forgot what I was going to say about it. The idea that this stuff that we're gonna mention now could all be accomplished in 49,000 years was because we didn't know the things about geology of the earth that we know today. And also, well, I think that's really the explanation. Well, this is Brother Johnson's comments. This is like a way to compress the story of the creation of the earth. This is one of his, this is in the second Epiphany volume, which is the Bible. I think that's the title of the second Epiphany volume. It's on page 562. And I'm gonna like just plow through it. It's a paragraph like this, right? Genesis 1, if true, as we believe it is, must have been inspired. These 11 points in the order of their origin are chaos everywhere, darkness over the deep, light. Oh, by the way, let me make a personal observation, which I have found very helpful to me, which is that if you pretend that if you read through the Genesis account of creation and you imagine that the writer has been placed where he can see these things happening, the whole account of Genesis makes a lot more sense. It would explain why creation of the earth has happened already, and then light appears afterwards because, you know, the atmosphere is clearing out. So anyway, here we go. Genesis 1, if true, as if we believe it is, Genesis 1, if true, as we believe it is, must have been inspired. These 11 points in the order of their origin are chaos everywhere, darkness over the deep, light appears, an atmosphere. So in my final couple minutes, let me check. I'm going to quickly mention these things that bother our atheistic friends who are in the sciences and who are deeply enough studied in this to recognize what it means. There's 4 basic forces of nature. There are gravity. There is the electromagnetic force, which is light and heat, radio waves, anything that travels in waves. There is the strong force. Nobody knows about this because nobody cares about this stuff, but the strong force is a mysterious thing that holds the atomic structure together because the center of every atom consists of protons that are all positively charged. And what keeps them from repelling each other? They call it the strong force. You know, you're down on the atomic level and the laws of physics change. Then there's a fourth one called the weak force, which is represented most popularly in radioactive material, because the weak force allows large atoms to fall apart. So all of these forces, and let me summarize this very briefly. Let me quote somebody that actually is important to wrote something I can quote. This was analogized this way. The forces, which I just mentioned, the 4 basic forces, if broken out into their subheadings, could be represented on a board, right? You put 100 dials in that board, and if you touch any one of those, then we're goners. You can't change the gravitational constant. You can't change the electromagnetic force as it controls the way electrons revolve around the protons. Otherwise, stars won't burn right. I mean, it goes on, and there's a lot of stuff that I can't understand when I read it. But in essence, the fundamental forces are finely tuned to allow for the existence of stable matter, the formation of stars, and ultimately the conditions necessary for life to emerge. Even a tiny change in any of these forces could render the universe as we know it impossible. So, if you have ever seen these YouTube videos of these eminent teachers and authors, guys work teaching at universities, and they have discussions about multiple universes. You ever run across that? Multiple universes. These are the guys who know what this means and who are the atheistic quadrant of that type of person. They are highly educated in the sciences, and they understand that not only the Earth, the Goldilocks planet, is finely tuned for human life, but that apparently the entire universe is ready for further development, if you will. Here's Brother Johnson's comment. This is on the 12th Epiphany volume, page 123. While we believe that as time goes on, planet after planet, solar system after solar system, and universe after universe, even galaxies, will become perfect through a creative process that will go on eternally, at our present stage of existence, the abode of God and a good angel seems to be the only perfected place in the universe. Then he says on page 169, also on E12, we may depend on it that as God created the earth not in vain, but created it to be inhabited, so the planets of God's many universes, as the inheritance of the Christ, will be developed and made the habitations of new orders of perfect beings for, this is Isaiah 9:7, of the increase of his government and peace, there shall be no end. So in a final comment, which I have what? I have 3 minutes. On a final comment I'd like to make is that you might be tempted to ask yourself if man is really that important to the earth, or are we deluding ourselves or something like that? So I would just remind us that the importance of mankind is that he is grandly important in God's plan. And we judge that by the fact that he sent Jesus to save the race of mankind from sin and death. And as to the singularity of the importance of mankind and the earth in the creation, we are told in the scriptures, Christ died but once. So we might not think too much of ourselves if we think that we're important in the eyes of the Creator, because we are. So may the Lord add his blessing.